Shalom Aleichem. Shmuly, you there? You hear me?
Yeah, shalom, shalom. How are you?
Family, friends, passersby, welcome to today's episode of a rabbi and a spiritual activist walk into a Zoom room. I am so grateful that my dear friend and teacher and colleague, Rabbi Shmuly, Dr. Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz, is joining me this afternoon, to be in conversation. Thank you for being here, brother.
Great to be with you, man. A big fan of yours and delighted to talk some Torah.
Um, Shmuly, you for me have been a model, a real example of what it is to have your feet in so many different worlds, but particularly the Torah world, the observant Jewish community, as well as a fierce advocate for social justice. And you're one of the few people I feel who don't see a contradiction in those identities. Could you talk a little bit about what brought you to those worlds that you currently are seeped in?
Yeah, totally, totally. Thank you. So, first of all, I think that there's always two dangers in how we relate to the forest. The first is that we just pull the bird we love out of the forest, as my friend Noah Kushner says,
Mm,
and then the bird can't exist outside of her ecosystem, and so she dies. So
mm,
we can't just say, "I like the tikkun olam bird, and I'm going to pull her out and pull her out of the whole ecosystem that helps her to thrive." So the bird needs nourishment.
mm,
So that's the threat on one end when we just pull out the one part of Judaism we love. And then the threat on the other end is those who can't see the forest through the trees, because they're so in the thick of the details of all this and that, they miss the bigger purpose.
mm,
And so for me, it was a journey to realize that actually the Jewish values that animate me most need the nourishment of the whole system,
mm,
and that I can't just pull out the ones that I choose because they will die, but also that we dare not lose the bigger purpose of what we're doing. And
mhm,
that bigger purpose, I came to the conclusion, was ultimately reducing suffering.
mm,
That it is a godly act to reduce suffering for other people, for other beings,
mm,
and the opportunities are all around us. So how did I get there? Well, it was a long journey, and the short answer is it really took me going to the global south and
mm,
being in villages as a student, as a teacher in villages around the global south and living with people in villages who were in the most destitute poverty.
mm,
And living in a lot of despair, living on less than $1 a day, the bottom billion, as some refer to them, and um, and realizing that it was complicity. It wasn't just a question of altruism. Am I going to give them something kindly? But how am I complicit living on a planet where I am the luckiest person in the world? Like I am a white, straight, cisgender man living in America in 2020, and there's people who were born into a lottery system of a whole different reality.
mm,
And but what I realized, in the day I would serve in the field, and in the night I would learn Torah
mm,
under a lantern. And I realized the two informed each other. We can't learn and not have our hands in the mud,
mm,
and we can't have our hands in the mud and then not be nourished spiritually. And so that's a little bit of the short answer of my realization that Torah is about life, and Torah is about death, and Torah is about reducing suffering. And that Torah is not only there to nourish me to continue to do that hard work as best as I can, but also to challenge me to make sure I'm on the last path. Let me say more thing about the forest.
please.
A Hasidic story you've heard before, but I come back to on a daily basis now, because I think that if the coronavirus did anything to us, it should strike us with the humility of uncertainty, that
Mm,
we have no idea where we're headed as a planet, as humanity. And it's these two guys who are lost in the forest, and they can't see each other, they can't see anyone, and then finally they bump into each other, and they're thrilled not only to not be alone, but to see someone else that they know.
mm,
And they say, "You must know the way out of the forest."
mm,
And the first one says, "I don't know the way, I'm so sorry." And the second one says, "I also don't know the way out." um, but then he says, "But I know that the path I came on does not lead out." And the
mm,
other said, "I know the same." And so I feel we're walking in a dark forest, and none of us knows our way out. but we know the path that we walked on doesn't get us out, and we have that humility, and we have the courage of walking together. And that's the allyship of keeping our eye on the prize, the light at the end of the forest, but not leaving the dark forest, because that's the journey, is to stay in the darkness even as we walk towards the light together.
Could you talk a little bit maybe about how you grew up? Was that type of living modeled for you as a kid, either religiously or politically, spiritually?
Yeah.
Would you share a little bit of your own upbringing?
You know, I felt very alone as a child. I was not raised in community. My family moved every few years from Canada, around New Jersey to Chicago. My journey continued in Texas and New York and Boston and California, years living in a caravan in Israel and other places. I really felt like a global wanderer. And I remember just once I left home and I just got on a train around Europe for 6 months just because I needed to be alone on the trains. And I remember just feeling alone in the world. And so I've always struggled with Jewish peoplehood, Jewish community, because I've never been naturally a collectivist. I do best as an existentialist alone. And my memory as a child is being alone. My parents worked, we moved, I didn't know kids. I just remember sitting alone a lot. And that was really hard. And also growing up in an interfaith home with a Christian parent and a Jewish parent, I also didn't feel connected in community, in faith. But I felt very connected to God always. And that was not a institutional thing. That was a private thing, a personal prayer thing. Felt like I was walking with God, talking with God. And I know that sounds like a Christian thing. Jews don't talk as much about walking with God and talking with God. I mean, some Jews do. Thankfully, people like you and I maybe do. But I was raised in service. I remember feeding the homeless in particular quite a bit, and being raised in conversation about values. We had dinner time conversations about values almost every night. And thinking about those. And I was fortunate to be raised with love, and love is the most important thing that we can channel forth. You know, the last thing I'll say about that is just that one of the things that solitude did for me was elevate my number one cause. My number one cause, outside of my family and God, I mean, my cause in society, in the societal realm, is vulnerable children. Children who have abused or neglected. I was fortunate not to be abused or neglected, very, very fortunate. But my experiences of solitude, I tap into all the time, that feeling of loneliness in the world, and take a child and amplify that and to the next level. And I just can't sleep at night thinking of a child who needs connection, who needs warmth, who needs comfort. And so my family fosters children. We get involved with helping foster care children. And that really comes from that place. And so some of my empathy, which I'm always striving to cultivate, which is radically imperfect, but comes from the text. Some of it comes from experience, but a lot of my empathy comes from just this early childhood experience of feeling alone in the world, and feeling like people are alone, and people are suffering in different ways, and they need connection.
I'm in awe when you describe that your empathy constantly needs nourishing or fueling, because I see you and your work, and it's so expansive in so many different ways. So I'm curious. I'm curious, as you find yourself battling on so many different fronts, what that nourishment looks like.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I really think that what we need much more than a political revolution right now is a spiritual revolution for the elevation of empathy, because the capacity of empathy, as studies has shown, has dropped so drastically over the last decades. And so that really, I think, is the number one work. Is, as a man, it's harder to understand what it's like to be a woman. As a white person, it's harder to understand what it's like to be a person of color. As a straight person, what it's like to be a queer person. Right? As a citizen, what it's like to be undocumented. As a Jew, what it's like to be Muslim, or as a Christian, what it's like to be a Jew. That it's harder to understand what it's like to be different from ourselves. Young person, what it's like to be older, and so on and so on. And so that work, I think, has a number of components for me. One is to see that to to assimilate into the conformity of our society today is to assimilate into a relational model of reciprocity, where everything is about, I will care about people who care about me. It's transactional, right? You help me, I help you. It's not actually about empathy. It's just about survival. It's about fear. And so the people who I want to be allies with are people who are allies to me, and the people who I like are people who will like me, and the others are the opposition. And it's a really binary way of thinking of the world. And it's a really kind of, and can be a selfish way of thinking of the world. And instead we might say, even if these people don't like me or don't know me, I care about them. I care about their feelings. In fact, even if they hate me, I think of populations who want to reject Jewish aid after a natural disaster. And we say, you know what? We care so much about your humanity, your human dignity. We're going to say it's not from Jews. We're going to sneak the money in. We're going to sneak the money in because I don't care what you think about me. The empathy is not based on reciprocity. And that's really hard. What does it mean to stand with groups today who may have anti-Semitic components to them, even while we still feel empathy for their own suffering? These are hard issues. They're not simple answers. But I think that the spiritual work, going back to your question, the work as I see it to continue to live it, for me has two different sides to it. One side of it is feeling more safe in the world. And that safety doesn't come from objective metrics, because we can't. As we said, the uncertainty in the world, we are objectively unsafe. We're going to die. There are enormous risks in the world, things that we cannot resolve. And so the safety comes from faith. It's an internal measure of feeling safe by knowing that we are okay on a deeper soul level. That work of feeling safe in an unsafe world, right? It's not a naivete, right? We still know we're unsafe on objective measures, but there's some level to say, if I'm with God, right? God is my refuge. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here with me, right? And here, you're my Rabbi on so many levels, but the Rabbi of Torah that emerges out of the Shoah, those who they're mamish in concentration camps. It's the definition of unsafe. And yet there's some level of still feeling connected, right? And now move away from the most extreme places of not being safe. And how can we still feel safe in an unsafe world, right? And that's for all of us. None of us are safe in this world. And so that's the first level, is on a deeper level, feeling safe in an unsafe world. And from that place of safety, helping then, because if we live in a place of fear and survival, we can't cultivate empathy. We're just in a place of taking care of me.
Sure.
If I feel safe, I can go beyond me, right? So that's the first level I'm working for. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. The second level is actually learning to see the other, see the unseen, see the invisible people, and hear the unheard cries. And that work is, I think of the Hasidic masters who their prayer life is not about just sitting with a siddur in a prayer book in private. Their prayer life is going out into the world, right, and hearing the sounds of the animals, hearing the children's laughter, the children's crying, right? The things they hear become connected to their prayers. The things they see become connected to their prayers. Our tefillot are interconnected with all of life. And so I think that process is what we call being woke, waking up in the world to see around us and hear, because sometimes there's so much noise inside that we can't even see beyond ourselves. And so that process of transcendence. So I'd love to hear if that resonates, or how you think about this. Yeah.
I mean, I love hearing your thinking out loud. It's so helpful for me. I struggle a lot with this, with modeling this type of being, especially with young children, because I'm curious, as I know you're a father yourself, and someone who constantly opens up, his home along with your wife, like how it's sort of it's a double-edged sword, right? Because we're doing this for ourselves, but we're also trying to model this for our kids too in the same moment. And so I'm curious if you have any reflections around that idea of.
Oh yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. you know this. You're. I mean, you're a public parent. You're not just a private parent. You
Yeah.
bring your parenting into your writing and your teaching, and it's such a profound part of your life. And a lot of people have to be much older to realize how important their family is. Something you've realized and modeled so early on. And you also, like something I strive for, work on in your own ways to integrate your children into your service in the world. And I think about that also, how I bring my kids to rallies and protests, how we
Mm-hmm.
bring guests into the home. I think of one of my 2-year-old child sitting with a refugee, I mean, asylum seeker from the border, who
Mm.
came into our home after being dropped off by ICE. And I couldn't talk with this girl. My Spanish isn't good. It's worse than not good. But my 2-year-old was sitting with her, and they were just playing together. Friday night Shabbat,
Mm.
they were just playing together and connecting.
Mm.
And I realized they were teaching me. I wasn't just me teaching them.
Mm. Mm.
And people ask me all the
Mm.
time. They say, "Rabbi, how do I get my kids to love Judaism?"
Mm.
I say, it's easy. You have to love it,
Mm.
right? At the end of the day, we don't teach them something. We live this stuff, and they live it with us. And if
Mm.
if we live it, they're going to live it with us. And so it, um, you
Mm.
know. Some studies on developmental psychology say the best way to teach your child empathy is to take care of their needs. That
Mm-hmm.
when you meet the needs of your child and they feel that needs met, they feel that connection of what it means to have a need met, and they feel more capable of understanding others' needs. So that's one approach. The other approach is to expose and discuss. To we talk a lot about the homeless and how we give them things and talk about them, and how they can kind of feel things around that. They feel a lot of things around animals. I think having an
Mm-hmm.
animal companion, a pet, is really powerful for kids. Sometimes kids can feel empathy for animals before they can for humans.
Mm.
um, and a lot comes with um, talking about the world in a way that doesn't overwhelm them, but they have a capacity to hold a lot more than sometimes we think they can.
Mm.
And then the other one is, how seriously do we take their own challenges?
Mm.
On the one hand, kids cry a lot, and we don't want to make every little thing into a huge deal. On the other hand, their world is serious to them. It's very weird to them. Yisrael Salanter said, "A child's toy breaking." Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, the
Mm.
Jewish ethical and spiritual development movement, said a child's toy breaking is like a parent's factory burning down,
Mm.
right? And that's how they experience it. And for us to under part of the empathy is entering how in their world do they experience this moment, right? And so this is such a huge thing. And as I mentioned to you earlier, dropping off my children this morning for school and seeing them cry at the door
Mm-hmm.
is just so painful for me, because it's not just, oh, they're going to get used to it, they'll get over it. At this
Right.
moment, their mom is crying out for me. They're crying out in the middle of the night of despair because they don't want to go to this place, and that's natural. Like, we all want to return home. I mean, that's Teshuvah, Elul right now,
Mm-hmm.
returning home to our Avinu Malkeinu, returning home to our father, our king, our mother, our holder, right? We all want to return to that place of being held.
Mm. I, each vort here is like worthy alone of further probing and breaking down. But in the spirit of wanting to ask you more questions to cover more ground, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Um, you know, but it also relates to this most recent point of yours of wanting to return home. You're someone who has founded so many different organizations, from Uri Tzedek, right, Orthodox Social Justice organization, of which I'm privileged to be a part of now, to Shamayim, Jewish animal welfare activism, to Yatom, the Jewish foster network, to Torat Chaim, which is a growing network of progressive-minded Orthodox clergy, a rabbinic association. Um, I think of how thirsty our generation is for the type of Torah and Yiddishkeit that you're living, frankly, of one that's connected to the roots, but very much engaged in the world and in the tsaris of the world, the suffering of the world. Would you talk a little bit about what it's like to 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 be this entrepreneur, to be this rabbinic entrepreneur who sees in many places a lacking, and the process
Yeah.
of building out that which we so desperately
Yeah.
need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, Reb Avram, I really dislike organizational work. I don't like fundraising. I don't like management. I don't like communications. I don't like strategy. I don't like bureaucracy and paperwork, and I don't like emails. I don't like any of it really. You know, I want to learn Torah and share Torah and learn and teach and learn from others. And I want to serve. I want to be in relationship to people and talk and celebrate. And I want to reduce suffering and be an allyship and do activism. And yet I've learned that a big part of leadership, as you said, is filling gaps. Right? We see a gap and we want to fill it. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees the slave, the Israelite, being struck by the Mitzri, and he looks both ways to see who's going to step up. One of the many ways to understand that moment, he's saying, I really don't want to get involved. I really don't want to do this work. Right? This is messy. This is nasty. This is complicated. But if no one's going to do it, if no one's here to step up, I'm going to do it. And so some people think of leadership as getting in line and doing what everyone else wants to do. And I want to compete and I want to get the position nobody else, everybody else wants, and there's something to that. We need that type of work. But I see the work as finding gaps. Where is there a gap in what's happening? And how can we fill that gap? And so if someone else is going to fill it, I want to step back and go fill a different gap. And so my social entrepreneurship model is based on that. Like, who are the alienated? Who are the marginalized? Where can Torah bring light, and how can we build something around that? And I have learned that I want to do that in a way that sustains. I don't want to just do one-off attempts. I want to build programs and efforts that have lasting power, that continue to evolve and change, but really, when we started the Orthodox social justice movement 13 years ago, I was like, oh, in 3 years we're out of business. There's going to be 5 of these things. 13 years later, there's no other Orthodox social justice organization. And I wish there was. I mean, I wish there was. But the truth is, people still view it as an oxymoron. Right? Orthodox means parochial and opposite of social justice, and there's plenty of data to validate such an approach. And social justice means universalistic and beyond. And so I continue to do that work. I would love in 5 years to close shop, because there's 3 other groups in town doing that. The same thing goes for the Jewish animal welfare work, or for supporting foster kids in the Jewish community, and beyond. And so I think that I used to be excited by the work of social entrepreneurship. That phrase was even exciting itself. And I'm less. I view it as a necessary component to do what I want to do, which is the direct work of trying to reduce suffering, the direct work of Chidushe Torah, of trying to have the Torah reapply to this moment. And in this way, I'm really inspired by Rav Kook, because he says, Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayim, right? This bracha that many of us say when we wake up in the morning, thanking God for being alive. And he says, this is halachta b'drachim. This is the imitatio Dei. To say God is chai v'kayim. God is alive, evolving and changing, and kayim, established, rooted, right? And so we are to be both. We need to be rooted. We need to be rooted in our values, rooted in organizational work, and then yet chai, evolving, changing, responding to the moment. And I think many establishments in the Jewish community are so rooted they can't evolve, right? And then many one-off things are so evolving to the moment, but they don't have the roots to sustain. And I think that middle ground is where we need to be. And this is the work you do as a social entrepreneur yourself, is really responding to this moment, uniquely in this moment. Where do I need to be? And yet doing that in a way that really has the authenticity of the roots.
It strikes me, for folks who might think that walking in God's ways might feel like a Christian concept. There you are quoting, right, the halachta b'drachav, to walk in God's ways. I want to talk to you a little bit about your Chidushe Torah, because I don't even over a dozen books, Shmuly, is that accurate, that you've composed yourself?
Yeah, but a lot of them are just my my ongoing thoughts and evolutions. It's they're a work in progress.
It's an incredible feat of just how active you remain. But would you tell us a little bit about this most recent work that you've published?
I'm more interested in talking about your book, because your book is phenomenal. Your book is phenomenal. Why Jews do that,
No
or
way,
30
not fair.
questions your rabbi never answered. This is a book. This is a book that is accessible to all kinds of folks.
Thank you.
That has beautiful artwork. A shout out to Fabi Rodriguez and Jenny Young.
My students,
beautiful
yes.
illustrations.
Thank you.
And this is accessible, and this is what we need: accessible new models of thinking about Torah in our moment. And so that's really exciting. But so thank you for the amazing work you do. And we should always remember that quality is more important than quantity. Thinking less about the number of things we do, but really having them be amazing. And so your book is really so exciting.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'll just say one thing about your question, which is the book that just came out for me is the Book of Jonah. Commentary. And I just love this book. I could talk about it for hours. Not my book, but the Book of Jonah.
Yeah.
And because it's only 4 chapters and it's accessible and it's so deep. And we are Jonah. Each one of us is Jonah, because we're not the perfect prophet. Not that there ever was a perfect prophet, but we're not the what many assume is the perfect prophet, the one who's Avraham Avinu, willing to do anything to serve God, even bring one's child to the altar, so to speak. But we are like Jonah. We're running away from God. We're running away from our responsibility. We're struggling. We're in the fish, trying to figure out who we are, figure out, our balance between universalism and particularism, our balance between prayer and real life, our relationship to others, and our own crying for the little kikayon above us, the little shade we have, immersed in our own self needs. And so we are Jonah, and that's why I love this book, is because we can see our struggles in his struggles, and we can see our opportunities in his opportunities. And so it's amazing that we read it on Yom Kippur, a day of second chances. It's a day for us to re-believe in ourselves. To remember our own potential, to remember we're all vulnerable, we're all flawed, we all have challenges, but we all have second chances to continue to rebuild ourselves. And if you're like me, you're just living with anxiety right now. You're living with fear, you're living with vulnerability, and yet you're also living with hope. You're living with hope that we have the resiliency in us to get through this, that we have the potential to keep growing, to keep evolving in our own lives.
Would you share for a minute more, though, about your own process of holding on to hope, especially in these moments? You mentioned being in the month of Elul, where we're reading a special Psalm 27, and we say Kaveh el Adonai, we give the hope to God, but it can be so challenging. I don't need to tell you to look around the world, to scroll through our Facebook, our news feeds, and feel so burdened by the suffering of the world. Would you share a little bit about, for some, and it's a gift for us to hear your own thinking, Shmuly, because you're humble in this regard, but you put yourself out on the line in so many ways, your name and your family, and I know that in many different ways and circumstances you bear the brunt for that. But if you could share a little bit about what it's like to hold on to hope amid growing despair.
Yeah, beautiful. I love how you phrase that. And so I think that we don't bring the present into the future. We bring the future into the present. And so we have to be radically awake in this present moment, but bring that future of what it looks like to be in that safer place into this moment, knowing we will get there. This is the moment of Miriam, that Miriam packs her instruments in the darkness. Others are like, are we going to get out of Egypt? Are we going to make it through? Are they going to kill us on our way out? Are we going to get through these waters? And she's like, you know what? I'm packing my instruments now. I'm not just bringing these matzahs. I know we're going to be on the other end, and I'm going to celebrate then, and I'm going to bring those instruments. And so how do we pack our instruments in these moments? How do we say, like, I'm going to, my march towards liberation, it has a nigun on my lips. There's a nigun, there's a melody on my lips in my despair. And so that's the song. I think we have to keep song on our hearts. Song is where I find hope. that in our music, and oh, you're the teacher of this. You are the teacher of this, because the niggin is what can bring us beyond speech, because speech can't give us hope. Empiricism doesn't give us hope. Actually, empiricism does give us hope, because the reality of the history of the world is progress. What can give us hope is actually history. History is dark, but it moves towards it moves towards the light. Really, it does. Suffering does decrease. Human dignity does increase empirically, and yet that's not what primarily gives us hope. It is beyond the words. It's beyond the measurements. It is keeping our instruments in our bag, keeping our melodies on our lips. And here's the other thing I'll say is that I think rather than have a grand narrative of hope, because I think that's naive, we can have hope moments. And those hope moments can be interspersed with our despair moments. Despair moments are okay. It's okay to really look at the world and see the brokenness and feel it and feel despair. That's what it means to be human, is not to run away from that. Really feel the hatred, the Jew hatred, the racism, all the hatred that exists out there, the political divisions. Feel that pain of people dying. Mamish, almost 200,000 people in America have died from coronavirus, and the blood is on particular hands. It's not only on hands, but there are hands that have the blood on. We should feel anger about that. So the negative moments, the negative emotions are real, and we have to channel them and refine them rather than suppress them. But at the same time, next to those moments are hope moments. And those hope moments are ones where we see that we can hold those emotions rather than be held by them. And in this moment, I'm going to hold that despair and that anger and that rage and that pain and the trauma and the fear. But I'm also going to hold even more strongly right now the joy and the celebration and the vision of where we're headed. And I'm going to hold it with a song on my lips.
Shmuly, it's such a gift to sit with you, even for a half an hour, and to hear your inner thinking, and to hear what nourishes you, where you gain your own resilience from. It's a gift. So I just want to thank you for being here and opening up your heart the way that you have. Where do we go to follow you and to hear more of your Torah and to pick up your Chidushei Torah?
Well, thank you. I don't know. I don't know, actually. I don't know where I'll be, but you're always welcome to reach out. And if there's ways that we can work together, I would love to figure out what those are based on some of the things I'm involved with. As you said, you can always email Rabbi Yanklowitz at gmail.com, or, I've got a public Facebook page where I put out some Torah over there. And I've got a monthly email where I put out some opportunities for learning and things like that. So you're welcome to email and connect.
We'll post links there after we sign off. Thank you so much for being here,
Keep up
Rabbi.
your amazing work.
Take care. Kol tuv.
Kol tuv.